Robert and Julian had been thick as thieves since they were kids. They started off in the same kindergarten group and later ended up sharing a classroom all through school. But life had other plans, and their paths split when it came time for college. Robert headed off to study economics, while Julian chased his dream of becoming an architect. Once they graduated, Julian packed up and moved to the capital, eager for bigger and better prospects. He kept urging Robert to join him, but Robert wasn't about to leave his hometown behind. His father, a huge influence in his life, had built a company from the ground up and offered Robert a solid spot in the family business. No matter how often Julian tried to persuade him, Robert stayed put, loyal to both his roots and his father's ambitions. 3 years down the road, Julian tied the knot, but the honeymoon didn't last long. A year later, they were signing divorce papers, and Julian shrugged off married life, settling comfortably into bachelorhood. Robert found the whole thing a little funny. He, meanwhile, had already fallen hard for a girl named Sophia. They'd met at university, and Robert had been quietly in awe of her for years, the way she went from a top-notch student to a wild, untamed party girl. Sure, she dabbled in some shady antics, but somehow still showed up for class and scraped through her exams. Robert couldn't help but admire that rebellious streak, maybe because deep down, he wished he had the guts to live like that himself, even though his own rigid sense of duty kept him in line. In his final year, Robert finally plucked up enough courage to ask Sophia out. At first, she turned him down flat, figuring his straight-laced ways would clash horribly with her free-spirited lifestyle. But a few weeks later, she slid into his DMs and suggested they give it a shot. Robert was over the moon. After 3 long years of nursing a secret crush, it felt like he was stepping into a dream. Robert would just nod, flash a polite smile, and duck out as fast as he could, eager to find Sophia, usually waiting for him on a bench outside. After wrapping up his studies, Robert spent some time mulling over the next step. Eventually, he sat down with his father, and together they cooked up a plan. Robert would pop the question to Sophia on New Year's Eve, right at the stroke of midnight. He believed, or maybe just hoped, that marriage and settling down would tame Sophia's wild heart a little. But nope, that spark never died. Sophia still lived for the thrill of big crowds, road trips to visit friends in far-off cities, and wild nights out. Robert hardly ever tagged along. His father, for one, couldn't wrap his head around it. "Aren't you the least bit jealous?" he'd ask, genuinely baffled. Robert would just shrug, tossing out the same simple reply every time. "I trust her." One afternoon, while Robert was at work, his phone buzzed with a message from Julian. He was coming back to town and wanted to meet up. Robert was ecstatic. It had been nearly a year and a half since they last hung out. Julian's new job had kept him chained to his desk. No vacations, no breaks. On this momentous day, Robert drove to the airport, smiling like a fool. Feeling a bit mischievous, he put on the same suit he wore to his wedding and painted a sign that said, "Julian." As the arrival announcement rang out at the airport, Robert noticed his friend making his way through the crowd. Julian burst out laughing when he saw the sign. "Cool, I have a chauffeur too," he teased as they patted each other on the back and hugged each other like only the oldest and closest friends can have. "Let's roll," Robert said, tossing Julian's bag into the trunk. "Sophia's waiting at home." The drive back was a blur of laughter, stories, and jokes, as if no time at all had passed since their last meetup. When they got to the house, Sophia greeted Julian with a big, warm hug, and soon the 3 of them were chatting away, the conversation flowing like they'd never skipped a beat. Midnight crept closer, and Robert, who'd been sipping on drinks all evening, felt sleep starting to weigh heavy on his eyelids. During their vacation, Julian, persuaded by Robert's friend to stay with them, and Sophia ended up spending more time together than anyone had expected. They discovered they had a surprising number of common interests, so much so that they barely noticed Robert was absent from the conversation. One night, the sounds of slapping and muffled voices startled Sophia's husband awake. As he slowly came to his senses, the moans from the other side of the wall made him realize what was happening. Still dazed from the alcohol, Robert was initially confused by the noises coming from his apartment. He rushed to the kitchen, only to freeze in disbelief at what he saw: his wife, completely naked, sitting on the windowsill with Julian between her legs, in an undeniably compromising position. Sophia let out a sharp scream, and Julian, too drunk to find his footing, staggered and fell as he tried to pull away from her. In an instant, the fog of alcohol cleared from Robert's mind, replaced by pure, raw rage. He exploded in fury, yelling at both his wife and his friend. Julian tried to get up, grabbing Robert's leg, but he was shoved away, stumbling towards Sophia, who was still perched on the windowsill. Robert's anger surged, and he shook his wife violently, throwing threats and insults at her. But the alcohol had taken its toll on both of them, and the force of Robert's actions triggered Sophia's nausea, causing her to vomit. Releasing her shoulders, Robert took a step back and looked at her with disgust. In that moment, Sophia was no longer the woman he had loved. She seemed foreign to him now, like a stranger, a mere object that had lost all significance. Losing two people you care about in a single blow is heart-wrenching, and even more so when the cause feels so trivial and inevitable. Neither Robert nor Julian had set out to destroy anything, but it all came crashing down, without warning. In a surge of emotion, Robert decided to cut ties with Julian, convinced that a friend like him was more of a foe. Julian, trying to defend himself, claimed that Sophia had been the one to make the first move. Robert might have wanted to believe him, but deep down, he knew he couldn't forgive his wife. Still, Sophia realized her mistake and tried to make amends. She threw herself back into the role of the devoted wife, canceling plans with friends and focusing entirely on Robert, trying to show the world they were the perfect couple. Robert kept the painful truth to himself, carrying the weight of it all alone. Yet one evening, after work, he couldn't bear it any longer. The relationship was irreparable. He and Sophia were trying to breathe life into something that had already died. When he got home, Sophia wasn't there. He grabbed the suitcase they had used on their trip and packed up everything of hers that he could find. Setting the suitcase in the hallway, he left a note that simply said, "It's over. Being betrayed by the woman you loved is devastating. But when that betrayal comes from a close friend, someone you considered a brother, the pain is magnified 100-fold." It was a tough year of therapy for Robert after the divorce. He couldn't stop thinking about it, going over the events again and again. But eventually, the weight began to lift, the pain faded, and to move forward with his life, Robert's first step was inviting a colleague from work, someone he'd grown fond of, to dinner. He realized that one horrible incident shouldn't define his future. Sophia continued to reach out, trying to repair what was broken between them, but Robert had already moved on. He was determined never to go back. She eventually found herself in a new relationship, but after 2 years of marriage, she was betrayed again when her new husband cheated on her with a coworker. The consequences of her own actions came full circle, and Sophia felt the sting of her own choices.